Hello folks, this week began with something a little bit different, and that was a rather cosy interview with World of Warcraft's executive producer Holly Longdale. Unusually, this took place on the brand new World of Warcraft Ambassadors Discord channel. And what made it most interesting for me was how different the questions were compared to those that are typically asked by content creators. If ever there was any doubt that we creators don't always manage to represent the full breadth of the player base, this was it. The questions themselves were submitted by users of the various community Discord channels who are part of the Ambassador program, with Blizzard selecting the ones to get answered by Holly. And I will put a link to the main Ambassador Discord channel down in the description, which is open to everyone and can be used as a jumping off point to the many partner Discords. Sadly, this event was not recorded by Blizzard for posterity, but Mr. GM did stream it live, and I'll also add a link to that down below so that you can see a version of the original. This Q&A session covered a lot of ground, but as you might expect, given that Holly is one of the most senior leaders of Warcraft, it focused a lot on where WoW will be going in the future. The current 3 expansion World Soul Saga was an idea from Chris Metzen to give the story that he had planned for World of Warcraft's 20th anniversary the room it needed to do it full justice. And the team have not yet decided if they will be continuing with multi-expansion stories or going back to having them be a lot more self-contained in the future. Those decisions, and indeed other decisions for the future of the game, will involve the dev team taking a look at both player feedback, but also how we and the wider gaming landscape is changing over time. Albeit, Holly did emphasise that the team are determined to make sure that the game will always stay true to its players. One of Holly's current big focus areas is the social aspects of the game, and in response to a very loaded question, she did acknowledge that the current guild and community tools are not where they should be. And this is an area where we can expect to see some further improvements in the future. There was also a question about the game's accessibility. Now, Holly really didn't have much to share in that front, beyond acknowledging that user interface changes are often among the longest running tasks in game development. But Holly then went on to follow up by posing a rather loaded question to us in the community, which I suspect may also be a little bit of a hint. Which is, would we be interested in experiencing World of Warcraft on a controller with what Holly described as a best-in-class user interface? Now, I would not necessarily jump straight in and assume that that means that full controller support is coming real soon. More likely, this is an expansion or two away, but plans in that area may well explain why the World of Warcraft team wanted to defang add-ons as much as they have, as a pure controller-based user interface, especially in a console, would be one that would struggle to support add-ons to any major degree. Speaking personally, I have to admit to feeling a little bit cynical about the idea of such a user interface actually being best in class, especially after experiencing the rushed and in some areas obviously unfinished user interface improvements that were launched at midnight. And I hope that if the World of Warcraft team are going down this path, they do spend some time and attention in learning the lessons that the add-on disarmament process has to offer them. Another major question to catch my eye was around world revamps and bringing older legacy systems back into relevance, an area that is very close to my heart. Holly shared that the team are paying some very close attention to how the current revamp of Eversong Woods and Zulaman is being received by players as they plan for the future, and she went on to share that there is an appetite within the WoW dev team for the idea of revamping more of the old world. My overall takeaway is that at least World of Warcraft's leadership have in the past been a bit nervous about how we might receive a change in focus away from adding ever more and more new zones towards redoing existing zones instead. And perhaps the dev team have been very pleasantly surprised by the, in my view, unqualified success of Eversong, Zulaman and Silvermoon. Maybe this is hopium on my part, as I definitely love to have more of the old world be brought up to date over getting more of these cosmic off-Azeroth zones that we've been seeing recently, as neither Koresh nor honestly Voidstorm have landed all that well for me personally. And towards the end of the event there was another slightly loaded question, which was players asking about that housing roadmap. You know, the one that we were promised over 3 months ago. Surprisingly, Holly repeated that promise of the roadmap coming soon, although acknowledging that this would be a blizzard soon, explaining that the housing team's plans have been adapting to player feedback, meaning that that future of housing tends to be a little bit fluid. As much as I appreciate the self-awareness of Holly's comments, I personally think that perhaps the team need to reflect on why it is taking them quite so long to commit to a roadmap. It is very easy to fall into the trap of talking about plans so much that one forgets the need to deliver on them. And I do wonder if that is happening a little bit in the player housing at the moment. And finally, Holly had one other little tease for us, and that is that player customization and expression is very much on her radar. Holly went on to share ideas such as player characters being able to touch each other, think high fives, along with the possibility of beards and even hair under a hat. None of those little ideas were framed as announcements or were even promised, but at the same time, I would be very surprised if someone as senior as Holly at Blizzard would be willing to talk about such things publicly unless there is something concrete to them going on behind the scenes. Again, do not expect these to arrive in the next couple of patches, but let's hope that it doesn't take as long as the officially announced plans to make all of those legacy reps account-wide are currently taking. Now, if you're a fan of secrets in World of Warcraft, you might already be aware of some follow-up activity on the old Felcycle secret. A couple of weeks ago, we found out how to activate the 10th orb in the Karazhan crypt. And now, thanks to the secret find in Discord, the next 2 orbs have been revealed along with a cool Transmog set. The 11th orb requires a 40-man raid group, along with one member of the raid having the odd-site focus item that is obtained from that 10th orb. I will link to a full guide down below. The group needs to head over to the Divine Flame of Beladar and Halifal, where a progress bar requiring 175 harmony will show up. Filling that progress bar requires the group coordinating to use a series of emotes. As this isn't a guide video, I'm not going to go into all the details here, so if you are interested, I do recommend following the link that I have posted. Thankfully for solo players, the final 12th orb does not require you to complete either the 10th or the 11th. But while this secret is technically soloable, it is a lot easier to do in a very large raid group. For this, you need to head over to an island southeast of Suramar, where using your Torture Pirith will reveal an invisible ghost, which will grant you an orb which needs to be taken to Gulk the Rumble in Izuna. The catch is that you need to do that without taking any damage jumping or swimming, and that latter will mean that you will need some water walking buffs. Making that journey with the orb and avoiding damage is extremely hard to do solo, hence my advice to do it in a raid group if you can. Success will offer a key and a lockbox containing the brand new Transmog set, and taking these back to the Karazhan crypts will unlock a final message from Rats. Again, a full link down below. Now, if these are of interest to you, I do strongly recommend that you try to get them done as soon as possible while there are still lots of people trying to do it. Secrets require very large groups, can be extremely difficult to do later on when not so many people are doing them. Now, also in the live game, if you've been experiencing zone-wide lag, usually in whatever zone currently has abundance and the world bosses active, then you are not alone. On reset day this week, I was experiencing lag spikes of up to 2 minutes in Harandar, something that made the zone completely unplayable for me. Thankfully though, help is now at hand, with a brand new hotfix that is going to ensure that abundance will no longer ever be scheduled in the same zone as the active world boss. And my own experience is that this has massively improved things. It does though for me raise a bit of a question. Issues with world boss induced lag have been a feature of World of Warcraft since at least Battle for Azeroth, and right from the launch of Midnight, players have been providing a lot of negative feedback about the lag that has been associated with abundance. So my question is, why on earth were abundance and the world bosses always in the same zone every day for the last 2 weeks? Blizzard, when will you learn? Now, is Midnight Season 1 far too easy? That is a question that is being asked by a lot of people of late, thanks to a combination of the first 2 raids of the season falling over in the race to World First in a matter of mere days, along with mainstream Mythic Plus players progressing through to doing plus 10 keys far earlier than they are used to. Outside of the extreme high key pushing community, filling a vault with plus 10s in week 1 of a season is usually an impossible dream. But it's a dream that has been realised by a great many players this time around. When compared to the War Within Season 1, which had that overly wide gap between keys, one that led many players at all levels, including the very high end, to greatly dislike the progression path, this drop in difficulty is particularly noticeable and very surprising. And I think that if you told most people that the first pass of the race to World First would be over before the first weekend, they would have laughed in your face. But that is exactly what has happened, leaving the race participants with days and days of Mythic, yes, Mythic splits, and very low viewership. Now, most people that I've heard from seem to think that Blizzard was probably expecting the add-on disarmament to slow the race down a lot more than it has. Now, Blizzard probably was expecting add-on disarmament to slow the race down quite a bit, but that's clearly not been the case. And in the run-up to the opening of the final match of Quel'Danas raid this week, data mining revealed that the raid received some massive buffs. As I record this on Friday afternoon, the first boss of March of Quel'Danas has recently fallen after requiring more pulls than all of the other bosses put together. And I have a very strong suspicion that the final boss will be an even stiffer challenge, meaning that I do think that this fight is going to continue into the weekend and perhaps beyond. So, is Season 1 undershooting its difficulty target? Well, only Blizzard knows what that target actually was, but my own personal guess is that Blizzard had intended to reduce the difficulty, although perhaps by not quite as much has turned out to be the case. This in part will be due to that add-on disarmament. Had the season been much harder, there would have been a backlash, which would have permanently tainted our impressions of that process, severely limiting Blizzard's ability to do any more in the future. But looking beyond that, and I do think that that overly difficult War Within Mythic Plus Season 1 very likely harmed the game quite a lot at the time. The first season is where players tend to come back to give World of Warcraft a fresh try, and if they get a bad impression, those players will leave and they will not return. Or in other words, the first season is the worst possible time to get the tuning wrong. And getting it wrong is something that has happened, at least in Mythic Plus, with the last 3 expansions. I strongly suspect that Blizzard looked at the success of Dragonflight Season 4, which to this day has been the best and most successful Mythic Plus season ever. And that was in part due to unusually lenient timers and a very high success rate. And I think that Blizzard decided to aim for a repeat of that. And so the real question for me is, did that attempt result in an undershoot? And the answer is probably yes, but I don't think the difficulty undershoot is as big as many people out there seem to think. And the real question is, will this turn out to be a good or a bad thing? My own personal take is that this is going to be very good for mainstream players. Less friction and higher success for the mainstream player base, especially in PUGs, is going to drive much less toxicity and a better experience overall. And for the very high-end players, Mythic Plus is of course infinitely scaling, which means that those players will just end up doing even higher keys than ever before, something that I think they will find quite satisfying. Instead, if there is going to be a problem, I think that problem is going to lie with the players who are neither in the mainstream nor the very high end, but instead live between us. Not everyone in that group is motivated by 0.1% titles or the thought of doing the highest keys possible. Instead, many of those players are very reward driven. And if their rewards feel far too easy to get, this could lead to a season that becomes very stale for them very quickly. The ultimate question for the Blizzard developers is, are the benefits in the mainstream player base going to be enough to offset any losses in that next level up? Only time will tell, but I suspect that Blizzard will find it very hard to meaningfully raise the difficulty in Mythic Plus in future seasons. giving more players a taste of low friction, low toxicity, high reward keys, only to rip that away from them will only result in one outcome, and that's negative feedback and many players quitting the game. And there is also one other very big unknown to drop into the mix. Patch 12.07 is going to be introducing yet another raid, and this has always raised a bit of a question. Would such a raise result in a bump in reward levels? It does seem logical that a late season raid would drop higher gear, but could that be a trigger for a mid to late season Mythic Plus refresh with higher difficulty and higher gear there as well? Or in other words, has this reduced difficulty always been part of a plan which included a late season life extending refresh? Now honestly, your guess is as good as mine, but with patch 12.05 bringing with it the ability for Mythic Plus players to get not one but 3 myth track gear items a week via a semi-deterministic bad luck protection system, this season has always felt like it would not manage to last the usual 5 to 6 months. That is, unless there was something more that we're not currently aware of. That's just a thought for now, but I do think that patch 12.07 is going to be one to pay very close attention to when it's announced. But pulling back to the subject of patch 12.05, and in this week's PTR build, we saw it go to a release candidate, which usually happens around 2 weeks before the official release. That would tend to point towards an April the 14th release date, which I think would be a lot earlier than anyone would expect. That said, there is no official announcement, and with the Easter weekend, the earliest we would get an announcement would be this coming Tuesday. It would not be the first time that we've only had 1 week's notice for a minor patch release, but that is very unusual. Most of the time we do see at least 2 weeks and often up to 4 weeks advance notice. So realistically, I don't think that the 14th is likely to end up being the date. 8 weeks from the main release of Midnight would point towards April the 28th, and that or the week before, which is still 8 weeks after early access, are by far the more likely dates. Up until now, I would have bet on the 28th. But that release candidate does make me think that the 21st is starting to edge ahead as the most likely date for the release of the new patch. I will do a full video update on patch 11.05, but in the meantime, you can expect a new open world Void Assaults event, a spearfishing activity that will award rather a lot of the fused vitality that you need for your epic profession equipment, offering you both a catch-up and a very welcome break from abundance events, along with the new Decker Duel event. And finally, just before I wrap up for this week, I do have some reminders for you. This Sunday sees the return of the Dark Moon Fair. As always, this is most notable for being a very easy source of both profession skill ups and profession knowledge points. This early in a season, everyone needs those profession knowledge points. And if you've any characters that if you've not maxed out the baseline professions already, then this is also a fast and easy way to get a little bit of a boost. Beyond that, we don't currently know if last month's removal of the Wii reputation buff for Midnight Renown was a one-off due to being in early access or a permanent change. But I am personally hoping that it is going to be restored this month and we can expect to see normal service resume, as without it I think the Dark Moon Fair will feel pretty useless outside of those professions. Also on Sunday is the one-day mini holiday March of the Tadpoles. For this you need to head over to Borean Tundra in Northrend and to the Winterfin Retreat, where you can adopt a baby Murloc for the day along with a daily quest to do. This Murloc only follows you in the area, so the event really doesn't offer much other than a little bit of extra content. But that content is low effort and low friction, and it's well worth doing if you want a little bit of a change on the day. And Monday sees the launch of the Noble Garden Major Holiday event. As always, we don't have any advanced knowledge of any changes beyond a promised overhaul of the Duck Disguiser toy from a couple of years ago. I'm personally expecting that the pattern of the last couple of expansions, where these major holidays get some new rewards and sometimes gameplay updates, is going to continue. There have been a bunch of holiday themed housing decor items data mined for some time. none of which to date have seen the light of day. And I do wonder if Noble Garden is going to be when we start to see some holiday themed decor in the game. The holiday event involves an egg hunt with daily quests in the old world starting areas like Goldshire, Azure Mist, Razor Hill or Brill, along with an event world boss that spawns in Elwyn Forest and Duratar. There's a mount to buy in the vendor, and that world boss drops another flying carpet mount. And if you're a fan of open world content, it is definitely worth dropping by to join in the fun. And that's it for this week's update. What do you think of the seasonal difficulty? Would you like to see Blizzard increase the difficulty back up in future seasons? Or have you been enjoying the seasonal content more this way? Comment down below. If you found this week's update helpful, entertaining, or even just plain annoying, then let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos along with my other content, then hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. If you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me in social media for updates. My link's in the description below as well. I've also started streaming on Twitch on Wednesdays, Saturdays and Sundays, and you can find a link to my channel below too. And I hope you'll be able to join me on my journey of exploration through midnight. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.